In Germany, the housing crisis can reject you without ever meeting you. Not with a conversation, not with a face-to-face, no. With a PDF, a number, a folder. In Germany, a home can be decided by paperwork so quickly it feels inhuman. And once you have lived through it, you stop calling it apartment hunting. You call it surviving a filter. Because here, the crisis does not only feel like high rent, it feels like gatekeeping. It feels like being evaluated as a risk before you are treated as a person. Locals know the ritual, the Besichtigung, the viewing. You arrive and it is not a viewing. It is a queue with eye contact, people holding the same thing in their hands, the Bewerbungsmappe. An application folder, payslips, ID, proof you are safe, proof you are stable, and then the piece that can quietly end you before you even begin. Schufa, a credit report that landlords commonly ask for as proof of creditworthiness. In Germany, you can be perfect in real life and still get rejected on paper. That is the signature pain. Because the rejection does not come as an argument you can answer. It comes as silence. No reply, no call back, just nothing. And you know exactly why. Your folder did not win. Your number did not win. Your file did not look clean enough. So renters start doing something that feels humiliating. They build a version of themselves that fits inside a document. They learn the words Mieterselbstauskunft, a self-disclosure form, a form where you prove you are not a problem, where you prove you will be easy, where you prove you will not cost anyone time. And when housing is scarce, easy becomes valuable. So people adapt. They stop asking questions. They stop negotiating. They stop complaining. Because when there are 10 people behind you, your home starts to feel replaceable. And once you feel replaceable, you start living smaller. In Germany's tight cities, small space living is not always a design choice. For many renters, it becomes compression. A loft bed is not clever. It is what happens when adult life is forced into one room. A wall desk is not minimalism. It is the last surface left where your life can function. Storage walls are not style. They are evidence. Evidence that the space cannot hold a normal life. So your life must fold. These are not solutions. They are coping. Because the alternative is not better. The alternative is losing the address. Now here's the part locals recognize immediately. Germany is famous for tenant protection on paper. But the emotional experience in a tight market can still feel brutal. Because strong rules do not stop the competition. They just change what the competition looks like. Instead of open bidding, you get filtering. Instead of shouting, you get documents. Instead of loud conflict, you get quiet elimination. And once you are eliminated enough times, something changes. You stop feeling like a citizen looking for housing. You start feeling like an applicant asking permission to exist. Now zoom out. The shortage is not imagined. Some recent studies have estimated Germany's housing gap at over 1 million homes, around 1.4 million in one prominent estimate. A government-commissioned study has suggested that Germany needs roughly 320,000 new apartments per year for years ahead to meet demand. But even the building pipeline has shown strain. Residential building permits have fallen to some of the lowest levels in more than a decade, far below what is needed. So the competition does not cool down. It hardens. And when competition hardens, the market becomes faster, colder, and more selective. Now, the unfair comparison that hits hard. In a normal world, a stable job should buy stable housing. That is the deal people believe in. Work, pay, belong. But the housing crisis breaks the deal. It creates a new reality. Income does not buy a home. It buys a chance. A fragile chance. A chance that depends on a landlord choosing your folder, on your Schufa looking clean enough, on your paperwork arriving fast enough. So why does Germany feel like this? Not slogans, not blame, just repeating forces. First, demand concentrates where opportunity concentrates. Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt, Hamburg, all of them are centers of jobs, universities, services, and transport. People are pulled into the same places. And when too many people need the same streets, housing becomes a bottleneck. Second, new supply isn't keeping pace. The government has stated a target of building around 400,000 new homes per year, including about 100,000 publicly supported social homes. But the actual pace of completions and permits has struggled far below that target. And when targets are missed, renters feel it as competition. Every missed home becomes another person in line. Third, scarcity turns selection into a moral test, not officially, but emotionally. Because when landlords can choose from dozens of good applicants, they can become extremely risk-averse. So renters start performing safety. They overprove, they over-explain, they over-comply. And people who should feel like adults start feeling like applicants. Fourth, the crisis creates a shadow market of coping. When the official path is too slow, people patch together housing through sublets, short arrangements, and temporary stays that never feel like they belong to you. Your life becomes a sequence of keys you don't trust. Now, people ask the question that always arrives: what is the government doing? Here is what exists on paper. Germany has a rent break in many designated tight markets, the Mietpreisbremse. In those areas, rent for a new lease is generally limited to no more than about 10% above the local comparable rent, the local reference level often linked to the Mietspiegel. There are also rent increase caps that limit how much rent can rise within a certain period for existing contracts, with stricter limits in some states. And because pressure has not disappeared, the government has proposed extending rent control measures further, keeping the rent break in place longer. There are also stated construction targets and support schemes aimed at increasing housing supply, including social and subsidized units. So yes, caps exist, controls exist, targets exist. On paper, the system is moving. But renters do not live on paper. They live in outcomes. And the outcome renters recognize is this: the line at the Besichtigung is still there. The Bewerbungsmappe still decides your future. The silence still arrives after you apply. The competition still feels endless, because a rent rule does not create a home. A target does not hand you a key. An extension of controls does not remove the fact that the supply is still short. So the crisis stays emotional. It teaches people to live smaller than they are, to speak softer than they should, to accept conditions they would never accept if housing was normal. And the darkest part is how ordinary it becomes. You start believing rejection is your personality. You start believing you are the problem. But you are not. You are living inside a shortage and a filter. A system where the difference between shelter and panic can be a single document. So here's the ending that should sit heavy. When a home can be decided by paperwork, when stability depends on a folder and a score, what happens to the people who keep being rejected quietly without even being seen? Subscribe to follow this series, country by country, because this is not one place. It is a pattern.